So I think we're going to introduce the next set of panelists now. And Virginia, can you come on video again and introduce our next set? Thank you.
Great. I thought I would get one of those stage breaks or whatever you call them when you. But we're gonna move on quickly. I want to thank everybody that has stayed on from the previous session because the next session actually pivots from decisions to data, right, and metrics that matter. And for that, I'd like to invite up my panelists as well. So if I can ask Neha to come on the screen. Wonderful. Welcome, Neha. If you can unmute and introduce yourself. Yes, now you're good.
Okay, you can hear me now.
Yes.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, good. Thank you for having me on the panel. Interesting Friday. Yeah, a quick introduction of myself. I've been doing corporate life about 2 decades now. Started off selling time and space with midday publications, and then moved into the software arena, selling software. A lot of years was spent in selling software, and then moved to marketing. Been with IBM for over 17 years now. Done varied roles in marketing and set up a digital center as well. Currently leading the India, South Asia performance and corporate advertising. So that's about me, and I'm in Bangalore. Yeah, enjoying this small, different lifestyle.
Wonderful. No commute in Bangalore is a gift.
Yes, that's right. So, I like that. No commute happening. Yeah, but I miss seeing people for real.
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
Great, welcome. Kushal, if I can ask you to join us on the screen. He's almost with us. It's a little dark. Kushal, can you see us?
Yep, I can.
We can hear you, but we can't see you. All right, welcome.
How are you doing?
Great, thanks. If you can introduce yourself, that would be great.
Yep, so I've been with the I think forever now. It's almost 2 decades. Life is more in terms of the sales side of in Rediff.com.
Kushal, we're losing you a little bit, so if you want to potentially, I think we've lost him. If we can actually move on to our third panelist as Kushal dials back in, can I ask Swapnil to come join us on screen? Hi, Swapnil, welcome.
Hey guys. Hey Virginia, how are you?
Good, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks to AdTech, Shiny and team to actually invite me over here. Really excited. It's a Friday morning. It's actually a day off for us. But you know, a really good topic to be really talking about. I do feel this is very, very relevant to the times and something really pressing right now. All marketers, I'm sure. So really excited.
Great. A little bit about your background, Swapnil?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm with Google. I of course, over the last I'd say about 15 odd years, I've been started in tech, and then of course moved on to more business intelligence, marketing analytics. I've been leading the function on measurement, marketing measurement at Google. What that essentially means is that my team really helps all our top clients, advertisers who spend a lot of money with us to ensure that they understand the value of the advertising that they're doing. So of course, everything under the sun when it comes to analytics, marketing analytics, and all of that is something that me and my team does. And I focus for India and Southeast Asia essentially. So these are the markets that I really cover. And yeah, so I mean, it's an interesting time. We keep hearing so many different things from different verticals that I speak to. So yeah, I mean, definitely a lot of perspective there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Kaushal's joined us back. Welcome back, Kaushal. And let's do a quick sound check and screen check. You there? just unmute. And Kaushal, do you want to just unmute? All right, we're having a little bit of trouble. So Shiny, if you can work with Kaushal to have him join us back with the screen. So let me kind of get kicked off as Kaushal joins back in, and we'll actually do his introduction in a little while. Shiny, can I ask us to move to gallery view for the audience? And let me set up this particular panel. And some of you know that I was most recently with LinkedIn, and in January, we released a study around ROI, the long and short of ROI. And it's very interesting because as we were prepping for this panel, we realized what is where are we coming from before we talk about metrics that matter today. World has changed very quickly. And I wanted to refer to some of the key highlights from this particular study. And it was, as I mentioned, called the long and short of ROI. And one of the key things that came up in the study is that many marketers, especially in India, think they're measuring ROI, but what they're really measuring is KPIs, key performance indicators. So we don't really truly understand what ROI is. And so the first thing about metrics that matter that we'll discuss is what are the things that really matter. The second thing that came out from that particular study was around this idea that marketers are really measuring ROI too quickly, right? 78% of marketers are measuring ROI within the first month of the campaign, and only 3% are measuring them beyond 6 months. Now, many of us know that the average sales cycle for many of our categories is well over a month, especially in times when people are conserving cash. The third thing that came out in that particular study was that marketers are actually feeling the pressure to measure ROI, not to demonstrate real outcomes to the board, which was the discussion of the previous session, but really about chasing additional budgets. And so the way they're actually presenting data is to support the business cases to drive more money. And so that changes the way they do that. So that's a little bit about the study. I encourage you to take a look at that. But let me kind of start with Neha helping us kick off and talk a little about this idea of KPIs and versus ROI, and also this idea of measuring too quickly. Have you seen that? Have you faced that? How have you tackled that at IBM?
Virginia, if KPIs, yes, we have a lot of KPIs. I think we, as a culture, what we are driving internally is to ask the right questions and what are we solving for. So depending on what are we solving for, then we stumble upon those right questions and then look for answers in data. Because today, if I were to look at, given a chance, we all want to measure everything, right? And there's an overload of data that we see. So it is interesting, and we can get obsessed about a lot of data coming our way as marketers. So as a culture, what we're doing is to look at, like I said, what are we solving for? And a particular example, like you mentioned, are we measuring early? That happened when we were looking at digital campaigns, and there are campaigns which goes across categories, some products which you could buy in few days, and some of the solutions which we would take about a year to close. The sales cycle is large, right? So we categorized those into the young, very young campaigns to young and matured campaigns. And that helped the team and I to look at not everything in the same lens, through the same lens, and differentiate the campaigns because of the age of the campaign. And also segregate, that would mean align the age and also what is the deliverables from each of the campaigns. And that helped us. And this, I would say, that was an internal need. Nobody prescribed it, but when you look at what is the answer we're seeking for, our answers were not accurate because we were using the same, yardstick. And that pushed us to say that, okay, let's talk about different categories and different buckets and seek for the right answers, because then your campaign management means optimization, and you don't want to go on the wrong path. So that helped us, and that was an example which reminded me when you asked whether we are looking at things too early.
That's really interesting because it's almost holding up a mirror. You probably got a set of data and it was giving you a set of answers, right? And you looked at those answers and said, this can't be right. How did you actually have like what sparked up you and said, this data cannot be right?
So it is, some of them were like, if you want to go and invest on the similar campaigns again, right? How do you decide where do you want to put the money in? So when you have a bunch of marketers asking for money, bidding for money, and that time you have to really look at the data differently, right? And you don't want to top up on campaigns that are showing immediate results, but you don't know if it is the long term. So it depends on the strategy and what we are solving for. And such situations actually help me look at them dispassionately and say that if this is the offering and the average sales cycle is this, but the offering which gives you a lot of revenue, but the sales cycle is too large, you have to stay invested. So it's pretty much like how you want to trace your own investment, right? You really can't trace if it's a mutual fund. You don't want to trace your every buck, but the overall picture of where you want success from. So that helped us, and that's my example.
So that mutual funds analogy is really interesting, especially right now when most of us are tempted to do something rash. Let me bring in Swapnil into this conversation. You know, Neha just set up this classic dialogue of marketers talking to marketers and all her marketers coming to her, showing amazing results. You know, but the big question is, who should marketing be talking to at this time? Where should this conversation be happening?
Yeah, it's a good one. And look, you know, I've seen this quite often. The fact that typically, you know, one can use data to tell a story, and the story itself can be changed depending on what your outcome or that you're willing to achieve. So obviously, we see this quite often you know, it's with all our clients. We see this, you know, where, you know, it's all about, hey, I want to really build a story. I want to build a case for a certain channel and get more investment for that channel. And hence, I would build the story that way. Now, when you look at these times and when you look at what's happening right now, obviously, there are hard questions being asked. The hard questions are, and you know, we see this across the board, is, you know, where can I cut my spends right now? And then obviously marketing comes as one of the top of the mind things, you know, to look at, you know, can I optimize there? And obviously the hard question is, which part do I need to cut, right? It's a question that's always been there, you know, hey, my marketing is doing great. My brand is moving up. All my brand salience is moving up. When I look at my sales and everything is kind of doing okay. Come this time, come COVID, of course, things completely crash. And now, you know, all your past learnings that you looked at in terms of, you know, that you've built over a period of time, over years actually, completely goes for a toss. Now, what do you do, right? And so this is a time when I think we have to kind of take a step back, figure out at ground level, figure out what parts of your marketing you had a strong belief about that was working from your past understanding and your past data. And then really, then what you do is set up some sort of, you know, and obviously this has multiple flavors. There's a flavor around, you know, which business you are from. So there will be businesses which will be severely impacted, and there will of course be businesses which will kind of be okay. And there are businesses actually which are flourishing in these times. You know, just to name few, media, for example. The media is you know, you see, whether you think of all the content that is being consumed now because people are at home. So obviously that of course is different. So depending on who you are, I think you definitely need the situation that you are handling is probably very different. And if you are in one of those buckets where you need to really cut back on your spends, then you definitely need to start thinking about talking to your finance, right? You need to definitely impress upon them to say, hey, you know, this is what my marketing has achieved over a period of time, and this is what it has a potential to achieve now. But obviously, when you think of this, and I faced this myself when I was part of a startup, is, you know, how do I prove what's the value, total value of marketing for my business, right? It's such a hard question. And it becomes even harder when you start layering on top of it all the marketing science that happens, right? A lot of it is very cutting edge, things like attribution, multi-click attribution modeling, etc. Now, these are things which are, easy to understand for a marketer, but when you talk to finance, when you talk to a CFO, it's something that they will not get it, right? They'll say, tell me the channel that got me the conversion, right? The sale. And it's just so hard to give an answer to that. And often the analogy that I take really is about football, right? You got 11 people working in a team, and the end goal is to actually hit as many goals as you can, right? And sometimes you build moves which require multiple people to pass to each other before a goal is scored. Now, who do you give credit for this goal, right? Do you give it to the striker who actually struck at the end? Or do you give it the credit to the midfielder and even the defender who really created the move for you, right? And so now these are questions which are very hard to explain to a CFO. But this is where I think simplification becomes very, very important. One thing that I've learned all these years is that, the more complex you make some of these things, which they are complex, but how can you simplify it to help the audience understand it well? That's what I think the end game is with a lot of this. And of course, it'll vary by the vertical, like I said. For example, if you're an e-commerce company today, I mean, you are shut right now, right? You're not taking orders. So what does it really mean? What do I really plan for? Or how do I even measure all the activities that I'm doing right now? It may not necessarily be marketing, but all the organic activity that's happening on itself. SEO, for example. So those kinds of things you need to kind of figure out for depending on which vertical you are in, and come up with a simplified narrative or a simplified set of insights which you take to your finance team, really a CFO, to ensure that your budgets are not cut, and at the same time be honest at heart to say what's the true value in your heart that you're driving for your business. And really don't overstate it too much right now, because it may come back to bite you later.
It's interesting because there's a question in the feed from Aditya that says, and let me read it out loud because I think it was a very interesting one, which is, what do you do if your data has something, you want to say something to the board, but your data says something different? How do you convince the top management to go in a certain direction when your data gives a different story? Any advice? There's some points of what you brought up there that seems to answer that.
No, absolutely. I think there are two things to this. One is, if you strongly believe in your heart, heart and heart, that this is something which is valuable for your business, but the data is not suggesting, then obviously there might be some exceptions in the data itself. It may need, of course, a little bit more drilling down to understand exactly why data is not telling you the story. The best presentations that I have done myself, or the most successful, I would say, are the ones where I actually believe in a certain story very, very strongly for all the years of learning, and I layer data on top of it. And the story doesn't start with the data, right? Data is to support your hypothesis. So I think you should keep it that way. And in this case, if the hypothesis and the data are talking two different things, then there might be exceptions. There might be things which you haven't considered, which need to be taken into account. Or in some cases, it may need experimentation as well. Sometimes you may not have all the answers right away with the data that you have. And oftentimes what we ended up doing is the proposal included experiments to say, hey, this is what we want to do, and we want to actually prove it for ourselves one way or the other with a certain experiment. So that becomes part of and definitely increases the credibility of whatever you are talking about. So I think those
Great. Are wonderful. Aditya, I hope that answers your question. Let me bring in Kushal. Kushal, I know that we're going to keep your video off so that we have clarity of the audio sound. Swapnil talked about, Kushal, first let me test, can you hear us clearly? Just want to check if he's there. Do you guys see him?
He's there.
Yeah, he's
okay.
there.
So let me kind of bring the conversation back to the two of you guys. So we've talked a little bit about what people were measuring. The last few minutes were spent that those issues were real, about measuring too quickly, and also focusing on these very elaborate marketing, speaking to marketing narratives that only we understand. And the key advice there is a lot of common sense and a lot of simplicity. Now, what's changed with COVID, right? So Neha, that was a world. This is a new world. And there's a lot of questions in the feed to say, like, how, what is going to be measured now? That was great at the time when life was good. But you as a leader looking at these proposals, what were you measuring that you are no longer measuring, or how have you reprioritized?
Honestly, life hasn't changed to a large extent. But like I said, going back to basics, or what do you want to answer at this point in time, and what do you want to chase? Currently, I would look at what kind of content probably is working, because we all want to hear. Human behavior is, because of this lockdown, I think we're not seeing a lot of people. So we want to listen. We want to listen in all kinds of ways. So I feel that there's a lot that we're doing from a content perspective. And the earlier panel also discussed, right? Let's over communicate. Communicate within the team, outside of the team, within marketing, outside of marketing, and also with clients. And what do we want to listen? So if I were to pivot, it is that. How is the content performing? What is the kind of listening you could do, possibly increase that, and see how we can, become more contextual. That's the effort. I may not be looking at impressions so much, or I may not be very excited about the clicks that's happening, or maybe engagement is a good one, because we need to stay engaged, and how do we want to stay engaged? So a slight shift. Like I said, when we look at our data dashboard, it's always 30 or 40 different KPIs, which we have visibility to. But which one do we want to pivot on, dial up and dial down? This is just another day of dialing up something and dialing down is what I look at.
So that's really interesting. There's a good question in the feed around the right time now is more for content and storytelling and not hard selling. Taking that perspective, how do the metrics and KPIs change? In your opinion, is this a temporary change, or is it time to relook at the traditional metrics? So when you talk about this idea of focusing on, content, how is content performing, right? And you're not looking at clicks and impressions. Tell us a little bit about, like, when you're speaking to non-marketing people about what's the quality of conversations out there? What are people talking about when you're engaging with your salespeople and giving them an update? What kinds of things are you sharing?
As a team, we are now sharing as to what is trending as topics, how are different clients of ours reacting to those topics. There are things that has come up, what are the struggles they have, right? Because end of the day, we are making our clients successful. So we're listening to what our clients are doing in certain industries, and what are the trending topics. We could just get carried away, maybe 1,400 different topics is surging, but then you want to pivot on those which you can make a difference. So look at those 4 or 5 big topics which you can add value to your client's business. And that's the kind of conversation we've been doing as a team. And I see a great amount of traction there. And we all like what we're seeing, and we feel that we can relate to it and go back to our clients. So that helps us. That is new. I feel that is new.
Yeah, that's a really qualitative conversation between you and sales. Like, what are the conversations? What are the topics? What's the sentiment around them? There was, for sales to be, in the previous panel, we talked about not being tone deaf and re-looking at how you're having these conversations at this time. Great. So let me keep going down that path. And Kushal, are you on I'm going to keep trying, guys. I'm an eternal optimist with video conferencing and the internet. I mean, so just a mic check. Kushal, are you back?
Pretty much back, but it's bad connection.
All right. Well, we'll try it. I want to pick up on a conversation that Swapnil had about tools, right? What can help marketers leverage tools to actually get the measurements that business may want to look at? Or is it, something that they should be changing internally, or what can they do? Where can they go for this support? Oh, I'm not sure. All right. Well, now that question has to come back to you, Swapnil, because I put out the question, so somebody's got to answer it. So what should we be using? I mean, we're not ninjas, right?
So, I mean, and this is something which I've been, to a lot of the conversations that I've had with our clients and advertisers. One of the key things we're talking about is this is a great opportunity right now to invest for the future, right? If you're a marketer, and you are in a phase where things are kind of low in terms of your spends have come down, you're not as active on marketing activities as you were pre-COVID. Given that this is a great opportunity for you to probably set the foundation right? What does that really mean is, do you have all the pieces of data that you need in one place in a format which allows you to actually publish or at least look at insights on a periodical manner? And so that becomes a key thing. And any tools that enable that for you right now are tools that you should definitely think about. Some of these you might actually already have. So, from my experience, what I realize is that a lot of the clients that I work with, they already have a lot of the infrastructure, or at least the tools in place. It's just about them. They just didn't get a chance earlier with the daily rut that you are in. You never got a chance to really think about it and come up with some sort of a structure to it. This is probably a good time to put that in place. And so really, whether it's about integrations through different. So if you're an omni-channel business today, let's say you're a retailer, obviously there is your store is shut right now, assuming it's a non-essential. But there but you also have an online e-commerce front. How do you really bring these two pieces together, create a single view for a customer? Now that's something that you've been grappling with. You didn't get a chance to really get down to doing it. This is probably a good time to establish that, right? Create that framework, create that structure, so that then when you are back, you at least have a good sense of everything. At least when you start spending, exactly what's happening. For every dollar you spend, how is it contributing to my online business, to my e-commerce business? How is it contributing to my store business? And bringing the two pieces together to get an omni-channel ROAS is something that we talk about quite a lot, which is, my total value of marketing is not just about what I'm driving online in e-commerce or what I'm driving offline. It's a combination of both, plus the brand salience as well. So you bring in all these different pieces together to understand what the true value is. So any tool that really allows you to do that today is something that you should invest in. That will be my short answer to this.
No, that's great. And that's interesting, because you're actually telling businesses that are actually going through the most distress right now, for marketing to not try to solve for revenue and short term, but actually take a step back and lay the infrastructure for when you bounce back. And so, Neha, let me ask you that question. At IBM, for example, even when I was there, we've been through ups and downs. And, there is a question from Indu, who's also a former colleague of ours in the chat, which is, looking at the future, investing for the future, laying down the foundation is great. But what do you do right now when it's really stressful in the business? Many of the people on the call right now are facing issues like their budgets got cut completely, like zero budgets. There are people on the call that can't see beyond like the immediate crisis. We've been through crises before where our budgets have gone down to zero. What is your advice for many of the people on the call?
I think personally, I would say take one day at a time. If you want to just protect the territory of marketing, it's just not that, right? We have to think about the larger ecosystem and say, how do we contribute even if there is stress in budgets? Our baselines are fixed, and then we relook at the baselines, but it's a very different environment. But some of our colleagues here, participants, are struggling with that. And I'm looking at, if you were to do that, we would be flat out planning and replanning, right? You have to think about new ways, maybe dial up organic, maybe play up on communication, go back to those innovations and see how we can support business. And this is the time you could be really partnering with business and saying, what is that you want to, because there are some skills which we have, and that's valuable for the rest of the team. So it's one team. And so that's my personal advice. Take one day at a time and not look at it from a long term and get stressed about how it's going to pan out long term, because none of us know how it's going to pan out. So that's my personal advice.
I could just come in here, Virginia. I think there are a few things to look at, really. Definitely, this is a great time to think about communication, video. And I see some of these questions on the here. So I can clearly say that obviously a lot of the verticals I see are looking at innovating in new ways to reach out to customers, not necessarily to close a conversion, but actually to ensure that the brand communication is on. For example, when you think of auto as an industry, and just to give an example here, the auto industry is right now thinking, hey, my dealership is shut, for four-wheelers, for example, what can I do, right? And one of the things that they're thinking about is, can I engage with my prospects through video, right? And all I need is, I need to, if it's all about, giving a sneak peek to some of the models, et cetera, can I create some, three-dimensional, views to show the model that we're talking about, or even have somebody talk to a customer, have some questions, really pointed questions in terms of, as they're thinking about, maybe not now, but 2 months down the line of buying a car. So people are thinking about that in terms of, how do I engage with consumers? The other thing that I also see happening quite a lot is creative testing, right? I can see this is a great time to do that. There are pieces which will definitely not happen today, which is things like match market tests. If you're thinking about doing geo-based experiments, those are things you can't do today, because obviously you need a stable consumer behavior, which is not the case today. So you can't get into any of those. But what you can do is look at, for example, doing small bits. So for example, creative testing. Can I do an A/B test on my creatives that I'm putting out there to figure out exactly which ones are working better? Can I, for critical campaigns that need to run, I can still run some of the analysis around those specific campaigns. I can do that. But when you think about long-term objectives and long-term outcomes for marketing, those are things that definitely you can't do right now, because there is definite abrupt change in consumer behavior. So I think those are some of the snippets. I'm just reading through some of the questions here, and I can clearly see that a lot of questions are about hey, the consumer behavior has changed. The businesses are figuring out ways to evolve accordingly. So what should the measurement do? And really, it's about taking those baby steps, fixing your basics, getting some of the some of the stuff which you can run even now. For example, if I were to just give an example, geo-based split tests can't happen today, but you can do cookie-based split tests, right? Which is still on to say, and that, because geo-based test obviously has a lot of noise, inherent noise to it. You can't do it, but you can definitely get down to saying, hey, cookie A got exposed, cookie B did not, and hence what the outcome was. Those kinds of things you can still do today, although you'll have to be careful on how exactly you set up those experiments as well. So I think the larger point is, it's definitely become a lot more difficult now with measuring marketing, at least in these times. But there are ways out. There are things you can and you can't do. And yeah, so that's kind of I thought this all based on all the questions that I see here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I've been taking some notes as well. Neha, did you want to add anything to what Swapnil said?
I was just answering a question as Swapnil was talking as well about video communication. I feel as we are all juggling between washing dishes and then doing this and that and everything, and trying to put on a lipstick and look pretty on the camera, everything, video actually can help us because it's non-intrusive. I can tell you something, leave a message, and you could come back and have a look at it. So I would say just we have to put ourselves in the shoes of our clients and see how they're also juggling with their homework, so to speak, and how do we make it easy. So it could be a good small innovation where we can leave things behind rather than rattling off the entire agenda over phone and say, please attend my webinar and this is all my agenda. It is non-intrusive. So we could think about those things is what I was just suggesting, one of the questions.
Yeah. There's a couple of questions that you guys have directed to you in there about sort of video and webinars and other alternatives. What I want to do while you guys are looking at questions is summarize some of the key takeaways in this context, because there's some really good ideas. And I'm going to organize them into what to stop and what to start in terms of measurements. What I heard from you all is, number one is stop protecting marketing budgets. Understand that the business is going through a crisis. And so packaging data that may solve your story so that you can protect your budgets may not be the need of the hour. The second thing that I heard was, stop using the current data to plan for the future, because much of it is not valid. And there was a great article in Think for Google that, if you guys haven't seen it, around should you stop measuring altogether? Because many of the trends and the data that you see right now, the variables that are involved are so unusual that they may not be representative of sort of steady state, right? So really, use your marketing acumen, use your connections with your consumers to really do the scenario planning that we talked about in the previous session versus trying to use just simple numbers. Use your intuition as well. The next thing that I heard in terms of starting is start measuring content, start doing more organic content and using some of your communities, your existing customers to communicate with them. I heard start creative testing and maybe cookies versus there are many options to actually do that. Start putting in the measurement infrastructure so that in the future, when you're faced with this situation, your storefront is ready for a situation like this in the future. And basically all of that kind of falls under this idea of, fix your basics at the time. So go through your renovations when you have the downtime to do that. Did I miss anything that you wanted to highlight in this sort of stop-start advice before we turn it over to questions?
I think you captured this very well.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add to this is just in terms of the unrealistic timelines as well. I think with now, if let's say there are some campaigns which still need to go and need to start, I think it's a good thing to really sensitize the management about, say, hey, all the measurement that we could do in the past will definitely not be as relevant now, at least this time. And so if you have to still go ahead with measuring in some shape or form, then obviously it will take a lot longer now to set it up. So obviously, one of the things you definitely want to make sure is you communicate that very clearly to the, whoever it is, that it'll take longer. It may not be as accurate as what is in the past. Will you be able to use this data 3 months down the line once we are back? Probably not. So it's going to be, a lot of these things are going to be very short term, what we are going to do now. For all the money that you have now and that you want to spend, how do you want to spend it over the next 2-3 months? I think those kind of answers you can definitely try to get even now.
That's great. And it's interesting because there was a question in the feed around, with the click to buy or some of these performance oriented campaigns. Obviously the data right now is showing that people are not going click to buy anymore. Right. And so there's a question in there, Swapnil, that, you may choose to answer directly or here is, what do you do in an environment where your business is addicted to performance marketing?
Yeah.
And has done well for you for many years, right? Like right. Google was our go-to for all things, click to search, and now people aren't searching to buy something.
Yeah.
What should we do? We're kind of lost in this new world, right?
Correct. That's right. Yeah. So, interestingly, the number of searches has gone up significantly, except that the searches are more around COVID-19 testing, et cetera, not necessarily, about buying intent. But yeah, I think this is definitely a time when we need to relook at least the short term, relook at how you can measure, and what we call as secondary metrics, right? So as you think of KPIs, one is of course a KPI which very closely ties to your business outcomes that you're driving towards, which is, let's say if it's sales, then your KPI definitely has to be the conversion. But given this scenario, if you're an e-commerce company, that conversion can't happen today, so then how else would you measure? So then you probably need to get into more shallower metric to say, hey, if people are checking out new products, not necessarily to buy today, or they want to add it to their wish list today, then adding to the wish list might become a shallower metric that you look at and optimize towards today. And then of course later when things come back, you go back to your original metric. So I think those kind of things you have to relook at. Think out of the box. Think of what else in the consumer journey is of importance, what actions are important, and figure out ways to measure those actions, which may not necessarily be a sale.
Right.
And then basis on that, you figure out short-term insights on what the ROI is. I mean, ROI is, Neha, of course, has a view there, in terms of ROI versus KPI. So whatever you want to call it.
And this really does answer Amrit and Vaibhav's questions about, in a world where, you need to look at some of the new metrics, what could these be? And so I don't think these are shallow metrics at all. Measuring behavior on the platform are intent signals nonetheless.
Yeah.
For behavior. So Neha, any final words or takeaways from you before I wrap up both sessions? I feel like I've earned my lunch.
Thank you, Virginia. Final words, I think it's stay safe and take one day at a time. I know it is easy for us when we are looking at performance and we are a performance team, we get carried away into protecting our territory and being defensive. But I think this is the time to join hands, make those partnerships, open it up, be broad-minded, look at the what are we solving for? I guess it just calms us down.
Great, wonderful. And Swapnil, final word from you.
No, I think, this is the way I look at this as just being an optimist, is that this is a great time for us to think about how do we upgrade, how do you upgrade your respective analytics deployment for the future, for 2021 really and beyond. This is a great time to do that. Forge all the partnerships that you need to do internally to do that. Most of the tools, you'll be surprised, might already exist in your system. So you may not need to procure new tools and add to more budgets, but essentially what you can do is, from what you have, there are ways and means in which you can really come up with creating a better platform for yourself for future. And the other thing is, just like I said, don't be protective about the part that you play in the larger scheme of things. I think, what is important for your business at a holistic level is something that you should look at and align to that. That will definitely be of value.
Great advice. So thank you to both of you. So to bring it back to the beginning of this webinar, we started with this idea of setting first principles, right, as an organization. And even at a time like this, first deciding, like, what does your company want to be in the world that is today? And then guiding marketing's role and response may end up meaning that what you were spending money on before, what you were investing in before, or what you were doing before, may not be the need of the hour, right? So a first principles guided marketing response to play the right role, taking it one day at a time, but being open to supporting the business and what it needs. But then once you actually find, what you can play that role on, it's to partner with the various stakeholders, whether it be the other parts of the business, the CFOs, CSR, different parts of the organization that need to work together. And that might be where your content comes from. That might be where your authenticity lies, what you're doing with your employees, what you're doing for safety, what you're doing for the community. All of these are the stories, right, that actually then create what you tell the market, what you tell your existing customers. And then once you actually take this beautiful kind of collaboration outcome, those same people need to look forward in terms of what are the scenarios for the future. And you heard different ways to do scenario planning from the previous panel. And in those scenario planning, there's going to be new sets of metrics and outcomes that really matter to the board. And what you heard from Swapnil and Neha is that you also need to start looking at different KPIs to be able to align with those various scenarios. Obviously, those KPIs vary depending on the scenario you think will turn out, right? And then finally, communicating those new KPIs to the same stakeholders that then feeds back into this virtuous circle of, strategy for the business, right? So, what we've done in the last hour and a half, I hope you can see, is a little bit of a process pattern around how the business connects with marketing and marketing connects back with the business. So with that, I want to thank all of you for being with us. I want to thank Swapnil, Neha, and obviously our previous panel as well. And back to you, Shiny.
Thank you, Virginia. I think that was beautiful, 2 sessions, very inspiring, and almost a playbook that all of us can kind of use, you know, during these times. These are tough times, and I think all these insights are going to be very useful for our audience. Thank you so much. We've had a wonderful audience joining us, and we're going to end with this, right? Thanks. Bye-bye, people.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Stay safe.